My name is Michael Warren. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I grew up in Toronto. It was, it was a good childhood. I had, a loving father. My mother was not with my dad. She was also an addict. So my dad came into my life later and found out that I was his son. She wasn't well, took it upon himself to, I guess you could say it was like a kidnapping, but it was more like taking me out of distress. 1980, a male like never got sole custody of a kid, whether it was a boy or a girl. There was no programs for like single dads back then, so he really had no support system. Quite an active drinker and drug user. It was a lot of chaos, a lot of moving around. Used to be in jail a lot when he was younger and hung around with some of the criminal element. It was normal to see people partying and went to many different schools. Something I always looked for was a stability. I would see my mom every couple every other weekend, once in a while. I guess it got later in life that I kind of figured out she wasn't like too well. And, my dad was a partier, but he wasn't like depressed or anything. I could see my mom would get, into her stuff and just, eventually she succumbed to her disease of addiction and she passed away. I don't know if it was a suicide, an accidental suicide, or anyway, she had passed on my birthday, on my 10th birthday. Yeah, something I wasn't expecting, obviously. I remember being called down to the office, and I'm thinking, 10-year-old kid is thinking, oh, it's my birthday. There must be some big surprise party or something. And it was only 10, but it really it was just a real heavy thing that happened. So I was behaviorally pretty bad. I would mess with the teachers or the principals, or I just wanted to go to the source because I had issues. I had the injustice, and I tried to find out why these things were happening, and I would go to the highest authority that I could, take out my aggression and angst against them. But this went on for many years because I kept changing schools all the time. My first experience with alcohol and drugs, I'm not saying I was born an alcoholic or an addict, but I was pretty much going that way. My first beer was when I was a kid at Christmas time, and most kids are like, ew, and then they would just whatever. I guzzled it. My first real drunk was, well, probably in my early teens, sneaking away, going hanging out with a friend. Something that I knew I wanted to do again. Something that I was good at. Drugs is a big part of my story as well. What I was exposed to, my first substance abuse, I would say, was probably marijuana. And I used marijuana all through high school, pretty much every day for years. Other drugs as well, and the regular party drug stuff kind of thing, mushrooms and acid as a teen. Started drinking in the morning some days. It would continue on till I would black out. Drink until I passed out, essentially. And this was just the same thing over and over. Tried to go to college, got money, and all I did with that money was just say, it's not mine. I don't care what I do with it. I'm just going to spend it on my alcohol and drugs. So that didn't work out too good. One of the best cures which is an oxymoron, is the best cure for something that's bothering you is just ignore it and hopefully it'll go away, but it doesn't. How things worked for me was if something wasn't working, I would move. And then I got into some other stuff too, like amphetamines, like speed and cocaine and crack, and I would start smoking that stuff. Weird because my dad was a cocaine user, and I saw that. I didn't like that when it was around. Really changed people, really made them really different. Whereas alcohol, like it made them sometimes more funny, maybe a little more aggressive. And of course, it always pairs good with alcohol. What better thing to do than to smoke crack and drink beer all night, right? Alcohol was the demon that I carried with me throughout my search. Cocaine was like that mistress that I would visit, and narcotics were like the beat up old bus that I'd drive around once in a while. Driving in my bus with my mistress and my demons all the time, looking for something spiritually sound and fit for myself, but it wasn't happening. Pray to God when I was like sick and dying. But as soon as I get healthy again, I just say, okay, see ya, thanks, I'm good. And I was like, why do I feel horrible? I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't steal from anyone. It was because it was a spiritual sickness that I was living with. Reaching for something that I had no business grabbing onto was substance abuse, like flicking on a switch and living in a blinding light. So I wasn't getting the peace I needed. So I tried to get into a treatment program. I had some bouts of sobriety, pure sobriety, but that was only because I had no access to it. And believe it or not, I felt better, but of course I went back. I had no idea what sobriety was. I was just like too young to really understand the true nature of addiction at that point. Later on, I was speaking with a social worker and she had said, maybe you have some addiction issues. So she gave me some numbers and I just didn't want to do it anymore and took a cab down to the detox, got exposed to like some behavioral aspects of addiction, get up, make your bed, brush your teeth, stuff like that. I wanted to move on with the process, so I went and stayed at O&M House. It gave me the introduction to meetings, 12-step program. That 1 month, that month and a half that I had of sobriety without drugs or alcohol was the first time that I'd had since I was, say, 17. It was good. It's just I had nowhere else to go. Didn't get into treatment. I was still going to my dad's, hanging out with some of the guys that I drink with. And, I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to smoke, but eventually it just broke down. And I said, it'll be different this time. I stayed off smoking crack for a few years, but I was drinking a lot and still smoking pot and still getting in trouble with the law. Obviously, the issues were not dealt with. I tried the other cures, like find a woman, staying with my dad, and the lady upstairs, I heard winds that she was in AA. She was taking me to meetings, but I didn't read any of the book. I just went to meetings. I was a bench warmer, that's what I call it. I was for a few years. I met a woman. We had a child. I had no sponsorship. I'd go to meetings once in a while, and I was still using. Tried to be a functioning addict. We had a baby, so I tried other solutions, harm reduction, going methadone. That was just as bad, if not worse, than the drugs that I was on. I was hooked. Let's put it this way, Hitler invented it, okay? So couldn't be good. But cocaine cut through, and that's when I started using a lot of cocaine. We separated. My ex-wife met up with another gentleman, had a child as well. After a year, I'd separated, I'd moved on. I don't know why I'm calling him a gentleman. I guess it's better than the word I used to call him. He murdered the baby at a very young age. I think it was about 2 weeks old. I stepped up for my daughter. So one day, trying to get my kid to school in a beat up old van with no insurance, suspended license, expired plates. Looked outside and the cops were in my van. We checked your plates. You have this, and this. I'm like, oh yeah, that's no big deal. It's like, give me the keys. What keys? The keys in your pocket that are sticking out. I go, oh, those keys. Okay, fine. I took my kid to school and I said, that's it. I'm out. And I went to the detox again. And this was years after I'd been to the detox, like 6 years after I'd tried to get sober in the first place. I dug myself a really big fucking hole. And I had no other way. And I just said I was regretting it for so many years, even though I knew I had to go back. Went to a sober place called the Downsview Dells because I wanted to go to treatment. I put myself on the list for Renaissance House and I called and they said there was a 5-month wait list. And I was like, ugh, okay. Well, I'll stay here, try to stay sober. About 3 months of sobriety at Dells, I was okay, but I started using again. And I was using there. I mean, it's not like the shelters downtown. It's more of a like, you stay sober, you go to a day program, that kind of deal. I was welcome to stay, but I said I can't do it. Did some more research. I waited for my date. And I got into the door, still kicking and screaming though, still using. I didn't read the fine print. You gotta not use for 3 days. Went to detox again, right? Over at Lansdowne Danforth, but I'm grateful that I did. I had a week to sober up before I went into Renaissance because I would have still been in a bit of a fog, right? And I was there for 28 days. You know, I was very willing. One guy was mentioning Alpha House because I was like, what do I do after this? I can't go back home. So I put myself on the list. I had about a week before I could get in here and I had to go home. I don't know about you guys, but it was a big test. My dad never had moonshine in his life. Well, he had moonshine. He had homemade hash and the coke dealer was coming every day. Now, this never happened before, but it happened in that week that I got out of treatment. So I said, you know what? Instead of sitting around here, I'm going to go to meetings. I didn't white knuckle it. I was actually happy to be sober and go to meetings. After a week of that, I got into this place, walked in the doors. You know, I was a newbie. I just tried to be who I was, who I really was. And that was just Michael Warren. And not the easiest. I had a lot of things I had to deal with. But like Alpha House was part of that process. I love the counselors here is because they are addicts too themselves, recovering addicts, and they know the signs of if you're trying to pull the wool over your eyes or if they see if you're hurting. They know all these things because they've dealt with them, and they'll call you on your bullshit too. And I keep coming back here every other week. I put on a service meeting here every first and third Monday. I needed a safe haven. If I was at home, I would have just done things like, oh, I'll get a gym membership, or I'll start a cult, or, you know, like these types of things are what we do. We try to fix things without having any fucking idea how to live. Alpha House was someplace that I could relax and be safe. Like they say, jails, institutions, and death, right? Alpha House is where you can not be so perfect. You don't have to put on your front and be like-minded with other people and be safe and just find your groove, right? Find your starting point. Get a foundation. Where are you going to go from here, right? My daughter is in school and she's seeing the best of me. I'm not always perfect, but at least I'm aware of it and I'm not dismissive. Never would have thought when I was, you know, even at the point where I had crossed the line between maybe I was an overuser to an actual alcoholic addict, that I ever would have thought that I'd make it more than a couple of months. I don't, you know, for us alcoholic and addicts, you can't think that far ahead. I have been sober now for 40 months, October 10th, 2019, so 3 and change. I've been sober and it's been amazing. Rocky road, buckle up, Buttercup. When you get sober, it's going to be a ride. I love Alpha House, and I'm proud to say that I'm not stuck on stupid anymore. All I can say is that if you're hurting and you need help, get help. I can tell you right now, if it wasn't for Alpha House, I probably would not have made it.